Welcome back, everyone. In our last videos, we were looking at Descartes' epistemology. In this video, we're going to transition to talking about social epistemology. We'll start out by looking at two ideas from Descartes, his infallibilism and his individualism, and we'll briefly look at some criticisms of those ideas, which will lead us into a discussion of social epistemology. So Descartes' views are subtle and complex, but consider two overarching themes from his discussion. Firstly, philosophers often want to explain the difference between believing something and knowing something. Having a true belief is not thought to be sufficient for knowledge, because sometimes you might get a true belief just by mere luck. You look at a multiple choice question, you think, I don't know what the answer is, and you just take a random guess and you circle D. Even if D is the right answer, you don't thereby know that it's true because your true belief was just the result of a lucky guess. So what's missing? What turns a true belief into knowledge? A traditional answer says that you have knowledge when you arrive at a true belief because of good evidence or justification you have for that belief. But that raises the question, how much justification or evidence is enough to turn it into knowledge? Descartes accepts a view known as infallibilism. So Descartes held that knowledge requires certainty, and knowledge requires infallible belief. So your belief must be so strong that it's not only true, but it's impossible for your belief to be false. There's no possible doubt. That's the purpose of the method of doubt, is to raise these doubts so you can see them, and then it's only when you are able to get rid of all those doubts that you thereby have knowledge. Descartes also takes what's called an individual approach to epistemology. So on this view, the study of knowledge and justification and rationality is largely about trying to figure out how to form beliefs from our own individual perspective. The central question is, what should I believe? And the only resources that we have for arriving at a system of knowledge about the world around us is our own ideas and reasoning. So each of us is sort of stuck inside our own head, and that's all we have to go on to try to figure out what to believe. These ideas aren't without merit, and a lot could be said in their defense. But these two themes in Descartes have also been subjected to a lot of criticism by other philosophers. So let's briefly look at some of the worries for that kind of infallibilism Descartes holds. One worry is that this seems to value accuracy at the cost of comprehensiveness. So Descartes adopts a kind of better safe than sorry approach. He would rather miss out on a true belief than accidentally let in a false belief. And so he's only going to let in beliefs that are 100% guaranteed to be true. But if you accept a standard that's so high, it doesn't seem that very many beliefs are going to get in. Maybe the cogito, maybe my belief in my own existence is infallible. Maybe that couldn't possibly be wrong. But that's not very much to build on. And so if only a small number of beliefs turn out to be infallible, well, there's not much we can do then to build on that and try to learn about the world around us. And so similarly, the doubts involved here might seem excessive. Someone might think that there's a difference between relevant, helpful doubts and irrelevant, unhelpful doubts. Usually we might think that the possibility that a yellow bird I see outside is a warbler rather than a goldfinch, well, that doubt seems both possible and relevant. Considering that doubt seems helpful for trying to discover what we do or don't know about the world. But someone might say, the possibility that I'm nothing more than a brain in a vat being deceived by a supercomputer. Maybe Descartes' right that that's a possibility. But someone might claim that considering that possibility is not really helpful to discovering what we do or don't know. They might think that that doubt is not relevant, even if it is possible. Now, Descartes might push back by asking, okay, tell me, what distinguishes relevant from irrelevant doubts? He might argue that there's no real distinction that we can make here. But let's put that issue to the side. A similar worry is that this infallibilism leads to overly skeptical results. This sets the bar so high that many of the things that common sense takes us to know just fail to be knowledge if we set the bar this high. Now, Descartes thought that he could leverage his discovery of the cogito, his infallible belief that he exists, and he thought he could start from there and overcome this skepticism and he think he could actually achieve 100% certainty in many areas such as math, physics, astronomy. However, most philosophers think that while Descartes did a good job presenting the skeptical challenge, his attempt to climb out of the hole that he dug himself, his attempt to regain certainty, failed. And so the infallibilism that he accepts does seem to lead to these overly skeptical results. There's also worries about his individual approach to epistemology. The worry is just that he seems to overemphasize the role of the individual person in forming their beliefs and gaining knowledge about the world around them. Our social environment also has important effects, both positive and negative, on people's beliefs and their ability to acquire knowledge. For instance, I think I know that certain vaccines are effective, but there's no evidence that I personally am aware of that I can cite and say, here's the study, here's the results that they got, here's how that shows that these vaccines are effective. No. I rely on the expertise of scientists. I rely on them to do the research. I rely on them doing the study and looking at the results and doing the analysis, and then to communicate their knowledge to me. So I rely on that social environment, and it makes it easier for me to gain knowledge about different things. Scientists can research some things, historians can research other things, and we can thereby sort of divide and conquer to gain more knowledge about the world around us. And our social environment also affects what information is available within our society. Facts about our social environment also affects who is considered a knower and is thereby allowed to contribute to our shared knowledge. So we tend to think that doctors and scientists are knowledgeable about vaccines, whereas a mechanic is knowledgeable about cars. And so the mechanic is allowed to contribute to our knowledge about cars, and the scientists are allowed to contribute to our shared knowledge about vaccines. Given the effects that our social environment can have, we should also study the ways in which knowledge behaves in a community, instead of just focusing on the individual person and the resources that they themselves are aware of for arriving at beliefs about the world. And this brings us to social epistemology. This is an area of philosophy that studies questions concerning the epistemic effects of our social interactions, environment, and institutions. Let's consider an example. So the internet is one of the biggest changes in our contemporary society. The invention of the internet has fundamentally changed the way that people consume and share information with one another. And those changes raise a number of questions. So here's some examples of epistemological questions, questions about knowledge and rationality that arise when we consider the way that the internet impacts our ability to share information. We can ask, well, what kind of positive effects has the internet generally had on people's epistemic lives? What kind of negative effects has the internet generally had on people's epistemic lives? Under what conditions can reading something online give you knowledge? What are the best practices or strategies for distinguishing true from false beliefs online? We might ask questions about particular sources, such as Wikipedia. How reliable of information does it give us? How much should we trust different online sources? Now note, Descartes is not entirely irrelevant here. Descartes might not have had the internet, but maybe something like his method of doubt could help us distinguish between the true and the false information we encounter online. I mean, as we all know, there's big worries these days about fake news and misinformation being spread on the internet. Well, how can we, as a user of the internet, try to figure out which things we should believe and which things we shouldn't believe when we encounter them online? Well, consider what a version of the method of doubt would look like when we apply it to online information. You'd read some information online, but instead of just accepting what you find online and moving on, you would stop. You would reflect on that information. You would raise potential doubts about it, and you'd consider possible ways that false information might have made its way online. And then you could do research and look to see if there's any more secure information that you could use to remove those doubts and verify that information you read. As a result of going through that process, those more secure sources of information you find might end up leading you to learn that the original information you read was actually false. Or Maybe you check on it and you end up removing your doubts, and that more secure information ends up verifying the original article you read. Or maybe you go through this process and you just can't tell. The more secure sources, they neither verify nor disprove the information you originally read. At which point, maybe you ought to withhold belief. You should remain neutral for the time being. So let's break this down. It looks like there's 3 steps involved in applying the method of doubt to information online. First, you raise possible doubts about the information you read. Then you research those previous doubts in an attempt to verify the initial information. And then you decide whether to believe, disbelieve, or withhold belief about that information you read initially. And each of those steps we can break further. When you raise possible doubts, when you read things online, you should think, well, who is the author? Are they a reliable source? Is it possible that the author's lying? They're just making stuff up? Is it possible that the author maybe misunderstood the situation, just made an honest mistake? Does the author provide any additional sources? Do they give links and references that would help to verify their information? Is it possible that the information is old and outdated? Sometimes that happens. Does any of the information contradict your background knowledge? That would be a reason to doubt it. Do there appear to be any inconsistency or other red flags that would give cause for concern, reasons to doubt that maybe the information is not the best? Is there any reason to believe that the author might be exaggerating claims in order to generate interest and clicks? Once you've come up with those potential doubts, you then do the research. You check, okay, what are the author's credentials? Let's look into it. You might look into, are there other independent sources that can help to corroborate the information you found in that article? Do the links in the article work correctly? And when you click on them and open them and you read through them, does it look like the original author interpreted the information from those links correctly? When you check on the history of the publication, does the author or that publication, have they posted trustworthy information in the past? Or do they have a reputation for posting misinformation? Once you've gone through that process, maybe you end up believing the original article because you were able to verify it. Maybe you end up disbelieving because when you research it, you find this contradictory information that shows that it's mistaken. Or maybe you weren't able to verify one way or the other, and so you end up remaining neutral about whether that information is true or false. While that use of doubt might be helpful, we should also be aware of some potential problems. We can see this by asking, how much doubt is it appropriate to exercise? Clearly, some doubts are healthy, and some people should clearly be more skeptical of the information they read online. However, it's possible that we might engage in too much doubt. We might raise so much doubt that we sort of paralyze ourselves that we can never make progress in trying to learn about the world around us. So, for instance, when I read an article online, I might want to check its sources and try to use other sources to verify. But then he might say, well, are you going to verify your sources? Are you going to verify the sources of your sources of your sources? And then are you going to verify the sources of your sources of your sources of your sources? You can go on forever. If you end up trying to raise doubts about absolutely everything, you might end up in a situation where you just can't get anything done. Another question you might ask is, what are the appropriate sources of doubt? So which things should cause you to doubt information you read? Sometimes we have legitimate reasons for doubting the information we read online. For instance, if I notice that a publication has a history of publishing misinformation, that's clearly a legitimate reason to be skeptical of the things that it says. But sometimes our doubts might stem from inappropriate sources. Sometimes people might not believe what they read online, not because there's any sort of legitimate reasons for doubt, but because they have certain prejudices or biases. And that doubt can end up causing different kinds of harms to other people and to our society. That's it for this video, but we're going to investigate that last line of thought in the next few videos. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.